Public outcry after leukemia claims the life of this firefighter. Soviet hijackers and a hostage are sent packing from Israel. And the MOT hits the highways in a crackdown on pre-Christmas revellers. There's been outrage from family, firemen and politicians at the death of a firefighter in Auckland Hospital this weekend. 35-year-old Tony Jennings lost a 2-year battle against cancer of the blood, a disease some believe he developed after fighting the ICI chemical blaze in 1984. Jennings was one of many firemen at the ICI disaster who've since suffered long-term illnesses, but he was the first to die.
I went there to save the premises and they're suffering now. And as a result, my son's dead.
John Jennings won't forget December 21st, 1984. That was the day ICI's big chemical store at Mount Wellington burned. It was the worst fire of its type this country has seen, and Mr Jennings' son spent 4 hours the next day on standby among the smouldering toxic remains. Like many of his colleagues, Tony Jennings soon developed a range of physical and mental complaints. He was finally diagnosed as having terminal leukemia and given 2 years to live. Since the fire, there's been a push for an official medical inquiry. Pakuranga MP Maurice Williamson's been pressing the government on the issue, but he claims the Minister of Labour has snubbed him.
I got turned down with the statement that the Minister was too busy to be involved. I'd hate to think that someone has to die before it can spur the Minister into action, but if that be the case, then maybe he hasn't died in vain.
Alan Kelleher and his wife Judy are still living with the agony of the ICI fire. Alan was also on duty that night, and while he knows his evidence isn't enough to link his illness to the fire, the lack of interest in a medical inquiry only makes it worse.
Tony has died. Can I say that he sacrificed his life for us? And I'm just hoping it's not going to be in vain, that's all. Somebody listen, please, that's all I want.
Tony Jennings, the man known to his friends as Whale, will be accorded full fire service honours at his funeral on Tuesday. Alex Dempsey for the Network News.
Nationwide power cuts are a certainty this week after industrial negotiations between Electrocorp and the PSA broke down. At 8 tomorrow morning, electricity workers begin rolling stoppages which will cut out 1/3 of the country's power stations for 8 hours at a time. The effect will vary in different parts of the country, but it's likely that domestic water heating will be the first to be cut.
When the turbines stop at Wairaki and 11 other power stations tomorrow morning, the electricity going through the national grid will be cut by 1/3. Electrocorp will have to ration supplies to local power authorities, and it'll be up to them to decide just what gets cut.
That may involve rolling blackouts to domestic customers where they switch off an area for a short while and then switch it on and switch off another area. It may involve switching off industries, and it may involve switching off water heaters for periods.
The cuts come after 3 months of negotiation between Electrocorp and the Electricity Workers Union, the PSA, finally broke down. Each side blames the other. The PSA says the strike will go ahead because Electrocorp's insisting on preconditions involving loss of money and conditions for workers before it'll even start negotiations.
This is at a time of record profits, of significant increases of productivity. Our members want only a reasonable pay increase that reflects their contribution to that situation.
The workers are seeking up to 9%, Electrocorp's offering between 1 and 2.2%. It says the 5,000 workers are already well paid. Production staff earn an average $37,000 a year, and an across-the-board rise would put up the price of power.
We have low staff turnover and we have no recruitment problems, and our staff are paid well above the average. So we don't think that any substantial wage increase is warranted.
As the two sides continue to blame each other for the impasse, it's consumers who'll suffer. The PSA has given notice of several more days' action, and Electrocorp says a settlement's now unlikely before Christmas. Some power authorities have already called for people to switch off where possible, and they recommend getting in touch with your local power board or MED if you want to know how the cuts will affect your area. Penny Deans for the Network News.
A gang of Soviet hijackers has arrived back in Moscow a day after commandeering a Soviet airliner to fly to Israel. Earlier, the KGB in Moscow revealed that they'd given the gang drugs and sacks of money in exchange for the release of children who'd been taken hostage. The children appeared on Soviet television news tonight, suffering from shock. Shots were fired by the gang during the 22-hour ordeal. The children were freed when the Soviets agreed to give their captors a plane.
At Tel Aviv's Abu Kabir prison tonight, the hijackers were put inside police vehicles bound for Ben Gurion's International Airport. At this stage, handcuffed and blindfolded, the 4 men and 1 woman did not know they were about to be transferred to the Russian authorities. At the airport, a team of investigators and KGB men waited for the handover. The Aeroflot jet had flown into Israel a few hours earlier with 19 Soviet representatives, including doctors, to oversee the operation. The first hijacker handed over was a woman whose husband was also one of the gang. The 5 were split into 2 groups, with Russian guards firmly gripping the people who'd been able to escape the Soviet Union with a jet and nearly £2 million.
And there's a twist to end the hijack drama. It's been learned tonight that the wife of the ringleader was a hostage, not a hijacker. Yugoslav consular staff in Sydney are preparing to board a chartered plane for home tonight, but the diplomatic row which blew up over the consulate shooting last weekend isn't expected to end there. In Yugoslavia, the government has described the Australian action as one-sided and unfounded and threatens to get even with a tit-for-tat expulsion of 2 or 3 Australian diplomats. Peace groups today attacked the government's latest offensive on the Anzac frigate project. It's a background paper on why the government believes that New Zealand needs to buy 4 frigates from the Australians.
New Zealand's maritime capabilities, according to the paper, are a key part of this country's defence plans. The new frigates, it says, will help carry out those plans, as well as cementing ties with Australia and creating jobs in this country. Mr Tizard warned New Zealand could be left possibly standing alone unless it made a commitment to its own defence. But that's not a view shared by the peace groups.
Our Ministry of Defence in their white paper have said consistently there is no conventional threat to this country. Our real threats are the protecting of our resources, like our fisheries, and, as proven by recent cyclones, disaster relief.
Today's release by the Ministry of Defence is part of a campaign to sell the Anzac frigate project to the public. That campaign's likely to continue, with this document foreshadowing further releases. Chris Bishop for the Network News.
New rules making it easier for homosexuals to bring their foreign lovers into New Zealand have drawn fire from the opposition. The rules would allow gays to bring their partners in to stay permanently, but the opposition spokesman on immigration, Bill Birch, says it'll only increase New Zealand's exposure to AIDS, and he says it'll be easier for gay lovers to emigrate to New Zealand than for some married heterosexual couples. The summer holidays are only a few weeks away, a time when many will celebrate, but many will be injured in traffic accidents, and some will die. To keep the number of accidents down, the Ministry of Transport launched its holiday blitz this weekend to keep speedsters and drunk drivers off the roads.
It's Saturday night, the blitz is on, but there are so many accidents in South Auckland that checkpoints have to be shut down as units are called away.
South Auckland for a 1014 injury. Yes, can you assist me with an accident with Havakura or we've run short on staff? Can you attend this accident, please?
It is discouraging because you do try and achieve a no accident record for the night, and when they roll on as quick as they did tonight, it's not pleasing.
By midnight, it's back to normal on a relatively quiet night. A relief after Friday night when the drunk drivers were out in force. 17 picked up in 3 hours on the motorway alone. Tonight it's fairly routine, but the orders are out. Anyone stopped for speeding or not wearing a seatbelt will be breathalyzed.
How much would you have had to drink tonight? A couple of glasses of wine. And nothing else? No spirits?
Some really have had just a drink or two.
To blow through the tube, and that's a negative test. All right, so you have been drinking, but you're within the legal limit.
Others may be heading for a court appearance.
The evidential breath test you have just undergone has given a positive result. That reading in itself, that test that I've just done, could be enough evidence to lead to your conviction.
Traffic officers say there are signs that the message is getting through. The road toll is down and the roads may be just a bit safer. But even with the blitz on, the accidents continue.
10-9 traffic, fire please to that location, that accident. Go guys. Is everyone out? Oh, beauty.
Even when drink's not involved, a skid on a wet road can produce potentially lethal results. An accident like this doesn't make the road toll. It only shows up in the statistics as one injury accident on a quiet night that saw 12 drunk drivers processed, 3 injury accidents, and nobody killed. It could have been worse. The blitz is on to make sure it isn't. Kurt Sanders for the Network News.
Auckland businessman John Sachs has had his name removed from the Gang of 20 list drawn up by former Justice Department solicitor Keith Peterson. The list included people that he suspected were involved in corporate fraud, but last night Mr. Peterson visited Mr. Sachs and told him he'd been dropped from the list.
Angry Otago basketballers are considering a legal fight for a place in the National League. The southern team's been relegated to second division before it even played a game in the big league. That's because the game's administrators reneged on their plan for regional representation.
Otago basketball's had plenty of hot spots last season, but now it's out in the cold. The Southerners wanted to be first division on merit of being representatives of their region. Under the rules it was legal. But the national federations abandoned the idea, saying all clubs have to win promotion to the top flight. It's left Otago angry and in the second division, worried that their talented players will be lured away to the big first division clubs. While delegates dispersed in Wellington, Otago President John Masters got ready to move the wrangle from the basketball courts to the law courts.
It would only be a question of asking for a ruling as to whether, in fact, the decision was correct. I personally don't think it was.
The Federation set up a working party to look into the Otago case and says it's not all gloom.
I think we would see Otago in there in 1990.
Meanwhile, Otago prepare for another tough season in the second division, knowing if last year's competition is anything to go by, promotion won't be easy. Chris Bishop for the Network News.
New Zealand is battling to contain India in their first innings of the third and deciding cricket test at Hyderabad. India resumed today at 211 for 4. After adding 6 runs, India lost Shastri for 42, caught by Trevor Franklin off Ewan Chatfield. A short time ago, India was 279 for 6. And the West Indies are still in command in the second test in Australia. They claimed 3 wickets in an hour this afternoon, ending a fight back by Aussie opener David Boone. Before stumps last night, the Tasmanian blasted 65 off only 76 deliveries.
Boone hooking away, that's a very good shot. He's got it down behind square, there's nobody out there. As Ambrose has done there again, and as Boone has put it away again. Yet another 4, the outfield here fast.
Boone's half-century was up in no time.
And he comes back for his 50th run. Well played, David Boone.
But today the Australians lost their momentum. Just as they were settling in, Valletta was run out.
And he's gone. Well, tragedy for Australia. That was the last thing they needed, a run out.
The run out unsettled Boone too, and on 80 he was next to go.
Logie taking a brilliant catch, magnificently taken. Boone is disinclined to go. He gives the umpire the glare.
And the latest score we have is Australia 197 for 4 in reply to the Windies 449. Since the Olympic medal-winning days of Peter Snell, John Walker and the like, athletics in this country has struggled to find stars. But there's new hope after this weekend's National Secondary School Championships in Christchurch. 3 athletes in particular have shone, 2 in field events, the other on the track.
Over 3,000 young athletes have been competing at the National Secondary Schools Athletics. Perhaps 20 of them will go on to the Commonwealth Games. Among them will probably be Tanya Murray from Dunedin. She got into athletics when she was 8 after a severe illness. Now, at 18, she already holds the New Zealand women's high jump title. Normally, Tania would have burned off her opposition, but today, in front of cameras, she was a little nervous and not on her best form. Athletics coaches on hand said media attention is something the future stars will have to get used to. Another of the bright hopefuls is Courtney Ireland from Rotorua. In the discus today, he broke his own record with a throw of 57 metres 40.
Head and shoulders above the rest of his competition at his age level, and he's approaching the sorts of levels that the throwers like Les Mills, who's the best ever in terms of New Zealanders. He's getting to that sort of level of performance.
Vanessa Jacks from Auckland. Her speciality is the 100 metres hurdles. She loves the event because of its challenge, and she's the current national women's champion. She lined up for today's final against a strong field. But she blitzed them, winning in a time of 14.10 seconds. It would have been a record if it hadn't been wind-assisted. She too looks certain of a place in the Commonwealth Games, and all three of the young athletes may in time fulfil the nation's thirst for new stars. Cheryl Colley for the Network News.
Time now to see what the weather's been up to and what we can expect. Here's Penelope.
There were cloudy areas over the north of the North Island and along the east coasts of both islands. Other places had a fine day, though isolated showers did affect high country areas. So Sunday wasn't quite as sunny as we initially thought, but I'm sure you enjoyed it all the same. Cooler than average in the north, 18 was the low with many places close to that. Meanwhile, Wanganui and Kaitaia shared the highest North Island reading, 22. However, the country's top temperature was recorded in Lumsden, while the low for the second day in a row went to Kaikoura. On the satellite, tatty bits of cloud cover New Zealand, but are weak due to the anticyclone. The same can't be said about this fierce-looking cloud mass filling the Tasman. However, it should weaken as it approaches New Zealand, moving away from its parent trough and into this ridge. And though the anticyclone is moving away to the north, it will maintain a ridge of high pressure over much of the country tomorrow. As you can see, the front currently in the Tasman is expected to quickly pass our southern tip. The anticyclone really prevents it from coming any closer. As it does so, a north to northwest airstream will spread onto the South Island. So, on to tomorrow's forecast. In the far north, a fine day with afternoon cloud, moderate easterlies, otherwise light winds with daytime sea breezes. Fine except for morning cloud along the east coast and the odd patch in the afternoon. Daytime sea breezes, otherwise little wind. Fine weather too for central New Zealand apart from morning cloud along the east coast and cloud in the afternoon. Freshening northeasterlies about Cook Strait, otherwise sea breezes. In the west of the central South Island, increasing cloud with the possibility of rain in southwestland. Mostly fine elsewhere. Winds, fresh northeasterlies along the east coast, a moderate north to northwest flow in remaining areas. And southern parts, increasing cloud throughout the region with some rain developing in Fiordland. Northwesterlies will become strong in that area while freshening in other parts. Temperatures in the east are healthier tomorrow. A few 24s hit the charts, but most places will be closer to 20. But there's nothing wrong with that. Looking ahead to Tuesday, cloud and rain in the west and south of the South Island. Fine weather's my pick for the rest of the country.
Thanks, Penelope. In today's headlines, a 35-year-old Auckland firefighter who was involved in the ICI chemical fire died in Auckland Hospital this weekend. Although there's no hard evidence, Tony Jennings' family, friends and fellow firemen directly blame the 1984 disaster for his death. 4 Soviet terrorists and 1 hostage have arrived home in Moscow after hijacking a jet to Israel, and it was learned tonight the hostage was the wife of the gang's ringleader. And the Ministry of Transport hit the highways and byways this weekend in a concentrated nationwide campaign to keep Christmas tipplers off the roads.
That's tonight's Network News and Sport.
Our next bulletin here on Network 1 is scheduled for 10:25. Till then, good evening.